wanting to do Jeremiah 49 through the end of the book. See if I can do that today. But I was going back and looking at some of the passages, and it seems like they fall in certain groupings. Like they are not hodgepodge. We began with talking about what God had against Israel, and that went on for some chapters, and then the nations around them, and all of that rhetoric, and even some of the harshness and some of the pain that he felt, and some of the anger and his fury. He was getting that out, laying his case. Later on, we moved into what God would do when he brings them back. Then there's a bunch of goodness. Then there's things that are happening that are good for Israel. They come back into the land. You have the branch come in. You have people wanting to come to Jerusalem. You have the Gentiles, the heathen, the pagans wanting to come to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were astonished at how good he is to them. And it draws them to him, plus his righteousness and his goodness. But right now, or at that time, he was showing his wrath and his fury. We're also periods where we do a historical narrative where we're talking about what happened with Zedekiah. And then we go back and talk about Jehoiakim and some of the things that happened there. We talk about other characters like Abimelech, the Ethiopian. We're looking at Baruch, who is his scribe, who goes with him. Where different things are going on, but you see those groupings. You know, talking about prophecy, talking about good things to come, talking about the narrative. We finish the narrative in 43. In 44, we start talking about that God is going to judge the nations. And, oh wait, actually, we go through 45, sorry. In 46, we start talking about how he's going to judge the nations. So we have, history goes from, I think, somewhere about 40 or so, maybe a little before that. Yeah, even back in 34, I'm just kind of grasping something here. But we have the narrative goes for about 10 chapters, give or take. And then at 46, he starts talking about the Gentiles. You'll notice in 46 that he starts talking about Egypt. He talks about Egypt for a chapter. Then he talks about Gaza. He talks about the Philistines. He goes against Moab. We're going to see in 49, he talks about the Ammonites. He talks about Edom. Then he spends 2 chapters on Babylon. And 51 ends with, and thus Babylon shall sink and not rise from the evil that I will bring upon her, and they shall be weary. Thus far are the words of Jeremiah. That's the ends of the words of Jeremiah. 52 is all going back again, like I've said several times, to 2 Kings 24 through 25:30, talking about the fall of Babylon. And we end with Jehoiachin being treated kindly. And again, this is connected to Christ. We don't see that. Why throw in that last chapter there? Well, we're connecting it to Messiah. But going back, there's some interesting and a little bit of a tragic thing I noticed. In where we're looking at the history, and we saw where Jeremiah was in Jerusalem and how poorly he was treated by all the kings. And he was put into a pit to die, and he was brought out. He was scourged. He was put in stocks. His word was maligned. Even his representative was treated poorly. And then came Nebuchadnezzar and Nebuzaradan, and he was the chief, and he actually has good things to say for Jeremiah and lets him free. You can do what you want. He decides to stay, but because he stays, he gets involved with this political intrigue where Ishmael kills, what was that guy's name? I forget his name. Gedaliah. So Ishmael kills Gedaliah, takes all of the Jews away. They get saved by Johanna, and he takes them, and now everybody wants to go live in Egypt, and of course God says no and tells them through Jeremiah. Historically speaking, unfortunately, it seems like, according to tradition, that's where Jeremiah dies. There are some people, very few scholars actually believe he went on back to Judah. The vast majority of the oral tradition is that Jeremiah was stoned to death by the people, telling them not to go to Egypt. So tragically, we stop at 43, and very possible that he was killed right after that. I can't prove it. He could be that he gave all the rest of these, 46. It could have been that he finishes all the rest of these while he's in Egypt, but according to tradition, he dies in Egypt. So he could have finished there. These could be prophecies that he was given in the past, or he was given these prophecies right before he died. So 46 again against Egypt. And God's dovetailing as if he knows you're not going to be around, so we're going to have to just make sure everybody knows what's going to happen next. Everybody knows Babylon's coming for them. And to top it off, I'm even going to tell Babylon what's going to happen to them. So I kind of lean that way, that God had him give all of this prophecy right before he died in Egypt. So I'm going to go with that till I get some better information. So we see in 46, he talks with the Gentiles, like I said, with Egypt. And then he talks about Philistines, Moab. In 49, and I don't want to do a sprint through the book, but one thing I have noticed, I'm not going to go point by point, because it seems like that each one of these letters was written to a different audience. I mean, it's not like Amnon had the letter written to Moab, or Moab had the letter that was written to Esau, or Esau had the letter that was written to Babylon. You would get these letters that would go to specific areas, and they would be put about in that specific area because the letter was to them. I mean, people weren't reading everybody's mail. You couldn't do that. Some of it was none of your business. But this was God speaking, and you'll find some of the rhetoric in 46 through 51 is similar, but he's giving them the same pronouncement. If I had 10 thieves in front of me and I was a judge and I'm bring them into the room one at a time, I'm going to be saying similar things to them about why they're going to jail, what they did wrong. I mean, the specifics might be a little different, but you stole, if they were all thieves, let's say. So my rhetoric's going to be the same to each one of these people as they come into the room, then he leaves, and here comes another person. That's the book, that's part of the book of Jeremiah, where he said these letters were put together, he wrote them, Baruch made copies and sent copies out, and then kept copies. So they sound similar, but they're going to be similar because they're going to the thieves, they're the murderers, the adulterers. And they all get the same wrath and the same fury. He wipes them out. The only person he doesn't wipe out like a plate is Israel, because of his promises through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and David. And then his promises, of course, to the captives that come back, that they will become a nation. Those promises are what keeps him. I mean, where's Moab today? Nobody knows. People can find Israel on the map. They can find Gaza. Okay, I'll give them that. They can find Egypt, but Egypt isn't the power player. They know where Babylon is. It's not the power player it used to be. And neither is any of these groups. I mean, Gaza, it's not a power player. Israel kind of is. So we see where these are going. So in 49, he talks about the Ammonites, and I will cause the alarm of war, desolation of heap. Again, same thing that he said to Edom, said to Egypt, he said to the Philistines. He's going to say to Amnon, read it. Don't glass over it just because I'm passing over it fairly quickly. But I find that when you read it, hear what he's saying to them, and you're that audience, or you're the judge giving that proclamation. He's being equity. This is fair. If I'm going to judge adultery at a certain rate for Edom, I got to do the same thing for Moab and Amnon and all these other places. I mean, that's equity, right? If I'm going to hold someone harshly for something that somebody else did, but I'm not being harsh, that's not fair. That's not me being a God of equity. So here he goes that, behold, I will bring fear upon thee, said the Lord of hosts. Again, that's in his military terminology. And I will make Esau bare. I will uncover his secret places. Thus says the Lord, behold, they whose judgment was not to drink of the cup, they were surely drunken. Remember the cup of fury that I'm going to make you drink. Here he is making them drink it. And behold, the cup shall be given. He's going to make it a desolation. Now he makes Judah desolate, but he's going to bring them back. None of these other groups came back. Thy terribleness has deceived thee, and the pride of your heart, O thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rocks. These people thought they were safe, and they weren't. And Edom will become a desolation. So we've moved. We're talking about the Ammonites, and now we're talking about the Edomites, who thought, well, we're down in the hills, we're down in the mountains, we're safe there. And no, you're not going to be safe. So he talks about the Ammonites in chapter 10. He starts talking about Esau. So he talks about Ammon, then he goes to Esau. As the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah and the neighboring cities, notice that, Therefore saith the Lord, no man shall abide there, neither shall the Son of Man dwell in it. Now, if you think about that part of Arabia today, what do you think of? You think of barren, you think of no food, you think of desert, you think of death. That's Edom right now. It's not the breadbasket. Some people think it was a bit of a breadbasket when the Israelites were coming through, that they actually, it wasn't bad. I mean, there were places that were dry. Yeah, they went 3 days without water. You can go through scruff. You can see trees. You can have bushes this tall. I mean, if you go up into a mountain or into a place where there's no streams, but yet you have, fairly decent green. You've got grass, but you have no water. So we're looking at that, talking about them. He's going to overthrow them. Behold, he shall come like a lion upon the swelling of the Jordan, and like the habitation of the strong. And I will suddenly make him run away from her. So here the Edomites thinking they're so strong and big and bad, and what's going to happen is that he's going to make them run away like a lion is coming. So he talks about them. He goes into Damascus, and Damascus, he talks about the different cities. It's interesting, he does talk about cities here. He talks about the geographic places. These places are not unknown to him. It's interesting how God knows the cities of these places. And, there is a wording here, which I went over last time, how he weeps. With weeping, in a sense. With sadness, he's doing this. But they provoked him. And he couldn't let that provoking go. He was honor bound to himself. People think God does whatever he wants. And he's happy to do everything. No, sometimes he does things because they're necessary. And because he needs to do them. Not because he wants to do them. We always have the God that does what he wants. No, here's a God that does what he needs. For his holiness, he needs to go in, but with sadness. I'm warning, I'm pleading, you don't make me come down there. And yet what happens is they didn't want it. Even the neighbors didn't want it. So that's what's going on. So we see in 49 here, we finish with Damascus, and he's going to consume the palaces of Ben-Hadad. He talks about different cities there, concerning Kedar and concerning the kingdom of Hazor, which Nebuchadnezzar shall smite. The tents and the flocks shall be taken away. Flee, get you far off, go deep, inhabitants of Hazor. He knows these people groups. He named the cities in Moab. He named the cities in Gaza, like Askelon and all these others. It's funny, he knows these people. And he goes, and Hazor shall be a dwelling place of dragons, and there will be desolation, and there will be no man abide there. And he speaks against Elam, Elam is actually a place across. We have the Red Sea is down here, but you have the Suez Canal up near Iran. Elam is a place across. I think maybe some of the Edomites might have gone over there and settled in Elam. It makes sense to me that, across that strait, maybe they had a settlement, maybe they went around and set up a settlement. But he talks against those in Elam. So it's interesting how he's talking against these groups. And he's telling them why he's coming against them, how he's going to come against them, and who he's going to come against them. And, he's telling them, go to the clefts, go to the rocks, run away, I'm making you desolate. They don't have to face the death and the famine and the sword if they don't want to. Just obey God and run away. So we see God dealing with the nations here in 49. And it's interesting how he's doing that. And so I'm going to do 50 and 51 and 52 together because there's a lot having to do with Babylon. And I'm not going to be able to cover all of that without making this too long. But again, going back and looking at all the nations. Stop here and go back. Go back to 46. And then just kind of glean over 46 through 49 and get a feel. Like I said, these all went out like letters. And we get to read everybody's mail. We think they read everybody's mail. They didn't read everybody's mail. When letters were written to a certain area, then the scribes would send it out to that area, and they would read that pronouncement against them. So let's be careful when we're reading this, because sometimes we're like, God's being redundant. He's saying again and again and again. But think about the thieves that are brought in one at a time. They have similar crimes. And they have similar punishment because God is a God of equity. Equity is he is fair. He's being fair to himself. He's being fair. Remember, we talked in the past about how the Jews would be fair in their judgment. God would have them be fair, treating them like they treated their neighbors. That's why some got wiped like a dish. Some were taken into captivity because they took captives. Remember the king that lost his thumbs and his toes. That's a great example of, well, I treated other people this way. So how they were treated was how they were treating others, because that's the God of equity. So when you read Revelation, when we get there, and if you're grounded in Jeremiah and all this stuff, you're going to see clearly that the things that are happening in wrath and fury are also happening in equity. Treating the nations how they treated those around them. And boy, that'll be the day. Thank you.